This is the informational webinar for the Community Workforce Partnerships Grant Program for 2027. This informational webinar is brought to you by the Massachusetts Executive Office of Economic Development. Welcome. My name is Alexandra Pulio. I'm the Deputy Director for Community Programs here at the Executive Office of Economic Development. Today, we're here to talk about the Community Workforce Partnerships Grant Program. We're going to give you some information about the grant program, its parameters, its funding model, the eligibility criteria, what we look for in a successful application, and then I'll address some frequently asked questions that come up, as well as some questions that come up via email. I really encourage you to take a look at the frequently asked questions document that's posted on mass.gov on the Community Workforce Partnerships page, because that will give you a really rich overview of the questions we receive frequently, as well as detailed answers that can help you better understand the program. So let's talk about the basic parameters of the Community Workforce Partnerships Grant Program. This is an operating grant program, which means that the funding is intended to support the project that is proposed in the application and the regular operating costs of the organization and the partners who carry out the project. The grant has a one-year duration. This cycle will be for calendar year 2027. The grant program funds 3 categories of workforce development projects and seeks community-led solutions to community-identified economic needs or economic opportunities. And what that means in practice is that every project that we fund is deeply tied to a particular place, a particular city or town, and is tied to what the people who live and work there want and need. It also promotes collaboration through a partnership model. So while each application does have a single lead applicant, in order to be successful, each lead applicant has at least one partner that also works in that community. The grant program focuses on single cities, towns, or neighborhoods in Massachusetts. Every successful funded application is focused on one single city, town, or neighborhood. The grant program strives to support economic mobility by prioritizing projects that incorporate supports for foundational economic well-being. These are the things that help people complete workforce development programs and help them be successful in staying in the workforce. And this grant program values specific and measurable outcomes. All right, so what is new for this grant cycle? The maximum grant for this particular grant cycle has been increased to $200,000. Last cycle, it was $150,000. The evaluation rubric has been updated to place increased emphasis on the strength of the link between the workforce development program and timely securing of stable employment and/or wage growth. We've also increased the eligibility threshold. Eligible lead applicants must have a minimum gross support and revenue of at least $500,000 as demonstrated by their most recent IRS 990 filing. Typically that's line 12 on the IRS 990 filing. So you would want to make sure your organization meets that threshold. Priority industry sectors, the proposal evaluation will prioritize projects that are responding to job opportunities in identified industry sectors in the region. The application process has also changed. For this grant cycle, we have a shorter written application with a new video response component, and we'll talk more about that shortly. And funding sources. We are now asking applicants to report any other state or quasi-public agency funding that they are planning to receive in 2027. Next, here are the key components of this grant program. We look for community-defined responses to community-identified economic priorities, focusing on a single city, town, or neighborhood, and reflecting the local economic needs or opportunities that are defined by the community, the people who live and work there. The target population is a key component of this application. We're looking for projects that are tailored to the distinct features of a local target population. We're trying to support the economic stability needs of a particular group in a way that can impact their workforce development success. And this project also looks for workforce development focuses, which means eligible categories here are job skill training, English language and literacy, and small business skill development. Collaboration. Projects have to involve active partners, ideally across sectors, public, private, community groups, educational institutions, and so on. We're really looking for that collaboration to demonstrate community-driven planning and problem solving, and also to show an active and ongoing relationship between the project partners. Engagement. So partners must actively contribute to planning and execution. Referral or funder relationships generally do not rise to the level of partnership that this project would expect. So let's move on to talk about eligibility. An eligible lead applicant would be a Massachusetts-based nonprofit organization that holds IRS tax-exempt status at the time of application. They would be experienced in providing workforce development services, so they've provided some type of workforce development services in the past, and are applying on behalf of a partnership, coalition, or collaboration involving at least one other active organization. And last but not least, have a minimum annual operating budget of $500,000. In addition, we're looking for a lead applicant who's able to primarily carry out the grant project and be responsible for managing grant funds and filing reports. If the lead applicant meets all the other criteria, but in their description of their role in the project, it just says that they're going to be a fiscal sponsor, that's not going to rise to that level. Additionally, applicants who are themselves employers, for example, hiring participants for a transitional work program, must pay all the participants at least the Massachusetts minimum wage. As I mentioned, there are 3 project types. 1, job skill training, including education and hands-on skills. 2, literacy and language skills. So that's broken into 2 categories. Applicants can select either adult literacy or they can select English language learning with a workforce focus. Then number 3 is small business employee skill development. So let's talk now about the awards, payments, and allowable expenses. The grant award is up to $200,000. As I mentioned, that's the maximum award. We do have a cost reimbursement grant structure. However, in recognition that many organizations may not have the available capital on hand to successfully execute a cost reimbursement grant program of this scale, we have made some modifications to that, and we'll talk about that shortly. Eligible expenses that can be reimbursed or can be covered under this program. So we're looking at operating costs, including staff salaries, materials, partner subgrants, economic mobility supports like childcare, transportation, and housing stabilization for the folks who are participating in the workforce development programming. Training stipends for the same group as well. You can also see the RFP for more details. And as I mentioned, the payment schedule is a little different than a pure cost reimbursement contract. 50% of the grant is paid at the time of contract execution, 25% after the first quarterly report that shows that the grant has been spent down, or the initial 50% has been spent down, and then 25% after the final report, assuming documentation of all expenses. So this is a cost reimbursement grant program. We do require grantees to document every dollar that's spent. We actively work with you throughout this process. We are enthusiastic about having orientations and webinar sessions and office hours to try to make the reimbursement documentation process as thorough as possible. But at the end of the day, these are public dollars and do require documentation of all spent. All right. So for this grant program, there are some ineligible expenses. These are also listed in the RFP. The first being personnel taxes and fringe. While personnel salary is certainly something that can be reimbursed under the grant, taxes and fringe associated with personnel cannot. Capital expenditures, real estate purchases, construction or renovation, and durable goods over $5,000 are all ineligible expenses. Vehicles of any kind, whether purchasing or leasing. Gift cards are not reimbursable. Cash App or Venmo transactions. Legal fees incurred by the organization. So I do want to make a differentiation here. Legal fees incurred by the organization. So, paying counsel as part of a dispute with the organization's landlord is different from providing legal services to folks who are participating in the workforce development program. So if your workforce development project includes providing legal services to folks who are in a job training program or in a ESOL course, that is a reimbursable expense as long as it's reasonably related to the workforce development program. For example, if you're trying to provide housing stabilization services, the fees incurred by an attorney could be something that would be covered by this grant program. And alcohol is not reimbursable. Fundraising costs, including but not limited to galas and other events, are not reimbursable expenses. Subgrantees that employ any officer, agent, director, or employee of the grantee entity or any member of such individual's immediate family. So the takeaway here is really that if your lead nonprofit organization has subgrantees and there are any employees in common between the lead applicant organization and the subgrantee, that would not be a reimbursable expense. Or another example would be if your lead applicant organization, your nonprofit, needs to hire a bookkeeper, and so they hire the spouse of the executive director who works as a bookkeeper to do that. That would also be considered a conflict of interest because that person is a member of somebody's immediate family, and we would not be able to reimburse that expense. So next here, we're looking at the foundational economic mobility supports. So this is really a key component of this program, and I did want to make another slide just calling this out because this is really key to the program design for this grant, and I want to make sure that folks are seeing this particular aspect of the program. Grant projects need to incorporate direct services from the lead grantee or a named partner to support participants with at least two of the following, that being housing, childcare, transportation, healthcare, which includes insurance access, mental health, and substance addiction services, and core sealing or criminal record expungement. So, last year we didn't fund any applications that didn't provide at least two of these services by either directly from the lead grantee or a named partner. And I do also want to say, we don't expect the lead applicant to be able to do everything, right? They're not going to be an expert in every subject, but that's one of the great things about the partnership model is that you can work with a partner who's an active participant in the leadership of the grant program and also has expertise in transportation services, has expertise in housing stabilization. So there are lots of folks in every community who have a deep and rich knowledge about these subjects, and I really encourage you to build your partnerships to incorporate that experience as well. So another aspect of this program design, we're really looking at the outcomes that you propose in your application. Those will become part of the project contract, the grant contract, if your project is selected to be funded. Um, but we're looking for you to define those outcomes in the context of the community's needs and the project's response to those community needs. So what are your outcomes going to be? How do they respond to that need, that community need or opportunity that you set out in the beginning of your application? And what's that services that you're going to provide to kind of get to that point that those needs are being met, right? So I really want to make sure that folks understand that this is a huge part of this program. It's a huge part of both the scoring process and the contracting process. So, it's good to spend a lot of time here. We're looking for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound outcomes, or SMART outcomes. Both the interventions and the outcomes should be SMART. So they should talk about, by when will this take place, and what exactly are you expecting to do, and what do you think will come from it. So if you're not familiar with SMART interventions and outcomes, there is a link discussing that in the application. The projects must have clear goals that are in the arena of workforce development and economic opportunity. So the projects really need to show that the goals are connected into that workforce development angle. And we also are looking for outcomes that demonstrate how activities align with the identified community needs, right? So I talked about that a little bit a moment ago, but we want to make sure that we're not just proposing, any random sort of outcome or activity, but that those activities are really tailored to that deep knowledge of the particular community that the lead applicant should have. Okay, so this grant program, it follows a quarterly reporting cadence. So those reports are due April 15, July 15, October 15, 2027. And then the last report of the contract period is January 15th, 2028. Those are periods when grantees would report both on the financial aspect of the project and on the project milestones. And a successful grantee will submit timely, complete, and accurate financial reports and will achieve at least 3 of the outcomes proposed on the grant application. So those outcomes that you're proposing are going to be a direct part of how the success of the project is measured. I do also want to note that January 15th, 2020 is smack dab in the middle of a holiday weekend. So the functional due date will be January 18th for that one. A new aspect of this grant program this year is that there is a video component for the application. We're asking applicants to record and upload a 5 to 8 minute video responding to the prompts in the RFP. I want to highlight 5 to 8 minutes, really try to stick within that time window. While we certainly could, if it's 8 minutes and 15 seconds, we can watch the remaining 15 seconds, but you do have reviewers who are reviewing many of these applications. And if it goes significantly, like if it goes past kind of 8 minutes and change, they're not going to be able to keep watching. So please make sure you're sticking to that time frame. The goals of this video are to hear authentically from applicants in their own voices, to provide a medium for non-written communication, so using multiple communication skills and styles, and to increase the human element of the application process. A simple cell phone video works really well. I'm also uploading a tip sheet to the Community Workforce Partnerships page on mass.gov that talks a little bit of some very, very basic tips about recording a video. We are instructing the reviewers who will be reading and scoring these applications to disregard videography technique and to instead evaluate for authenticity and complete responses to the video prompts. So please don't spend lots of money on videography. That's not going to get you a more successful application. Please make sure that you respond to the prompts, that you answer the questions authentically, and that you are sticking to the time frame. Yeah, again, keep it simple. we're not trying to increase the burden here, but instead just trying to diversify the way that we evaluate applications and make sure that we're letting folks' work shine as many ways as possible. So functionally, you'll see that the application is now shorter, the written application, and that many of those written questions have been instead moved to the video format. Okay, so I'm going to share some high-level tips just for making a video. These are also from the same video tip sheet I mentioned earlier that's available on mass.gov to help you make your grant application video. Keep the video short and focused. Write down a few key points for each question before recording. Aim for about 5 minutes. That way, if you go over, you have plenty of time. Make sure you're using good lighting. So face a window for a natural light. Don't put a lamp behind you. Record in a quiet room, not a place where there's a lot of other noise or traffic happening. And use a smartphone or a laptop camera. Those are both fine options. Make sure that it's steady and resting on something, not just being held in your hand, and keep the camera at eye level. You'll want to choose a simple background with less items in the frame behind you. Speak clearly and naturally, be yourself. The goal of this, right, is to make these as authentic as possible. So please be yourself. Speak a little slower than normal. Look at the camera lens and not the screen. Before you submit, watch the video once and make sure that you can see faces clearly, voices can be heard easily, and the video matches the required length. We did have a question about whether, like, who should make these videos, who's the best person to record it. We don't really have a particular perspective on that. I think whoever you think is the best voice or voices for this project are the folks that you should include in your video. Just to note that if you are including participants, please be very careful and make sure that you're, having a written waiver to use their likeness in this video, because of course it is a privacy concern. Okay, and here you'll see the list of the prompts for the video component of the application. These are all listed in the RFP. I did just want to give you a flavor of these, what you will be asked to respond to in the video component. Okay. Next up here, we have the evaluation criteria for applications. So I've listed sort of the high level evaluation criteria here. Geography and target populations, long-term impact, innovation, demonstration of need, outcomes and impacts, capacity to succeed, and equity and opportunity. And then we have up to 10 bonus points for geographic community and foundations for economic mobility. These are detailed more in the RFP. I really encourage you to take a closer look at those to understand really what we're looking for in each of those sections. And next up, if you read through all of the RFP and you watch this webinar and you decide that you want to apply, the submission requirements are both the eligibility and the application forms and submittable, including uploading the organization's most recent IRS 990, completing the video component and uploading it into the submittable application form, and partnership support letters from each of the named project partners. Please don't provide MOUs. I know some folks did provide those last year and we accepted them. This year we will not be accepting those because we really want to show that the organization who's listed as a partner understands that this is a forward-looking responsibility and sets out what they will be doing in this particular project. So that's a key aspect of this program design, and we really want to hear from each of those partners, specifically talking about how they will be collaborating on this project. The application lives on the Executive Office of Economic Development submittable page. It is linked in the RFP and on mass.gov, and you can see the URL here if you want to go directly to the submittable page. Key dates. So the application deadline for this program is May 6, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. Please be really clear here that if your application wasn't submitted at 11:59, it will not be able to be submitted after that. You will lose the capacity to submit it, and we will not be accepting applications that weren't submitted. So please make every effort to not be still working on it that close to the deadline, because every year there are folks who aren't successful in completing before the deadline. And if you're putting all this great work into this application, we want to make sure that we get to review it. So please don't wait until the last moment. On the day of the due date, so May 6th, technical support from EOED ends at 4 p.m. So we can't provide any technical support after that time. You can certainly still use submittable.com/help, which is a great resource, but you will not be able to reach out to our team for support after 4 p.m. So another great reason to get your submission in early in case you have any difficulty with the technology involved. And the last important notification here, that we will make award notifications in September 2026. So I know that seems like a long way away. Unfortunately, not that far away. So we will be making notification of awards and folks who were not successful at that time, not before then. The grant period is January 1st, 2027 to December 31st, 2027. So it's the 2027 calendar year is when folks will have the chance to spend on their grants. A few technical tips here. Submittable's help page I mentioned earlier is submittable.com/help. The online application form is available through Submittable. Internet Explorer does not work with Submittable, so please don't use that. You can use Chrome, Firefox, or Safari. You'll need to create a free Submittable account or sign in Google or Facebook credentials to access the application. And you can save a draft of your work as you're working on it if you'd like to finish filling it out at a later date. Some common technical issues that we see. Please don't share a login. Sharing a login can cause there to be different versions of the same application in Submittable, which can cause you to lose access to the whole thing. So don't share a login with anybody else. Instead, if you want to work with someone else on the application, use the collaboration tool. So using that, the person starting the application would use the invite collaborators button that's in the upper right hand corner, and then the collaborators would all be able to work on the same application together. So you can do that without endangering anyone's cybersecurity. So please do take advantage of that tool. Another common technical issue is you get to the bottom of the page, you're hitting submit, and it's not submitting. That usually means that not all the required fields have been completed. That can include tables. So if you haven't written something in a table and the form is not submitting when you click submit, that probably means the table isn't complete. So make sure you go back and look at those things. Submittable won't necessarily bring you back to the place that's not complete. It will highlight it in red, but you'll have to scroll back up to see that. So make sure that all your fields are complete. Having multiple windows open that are logged in can create issues with submitting, or can create multiple different versions. As I mentioned, that's something we really want to avoid. Whenever possible, try to log out of any other places where you've logged into the Submittable application. You're going to save it, you're going to log out, you're going to close out the browser, close out any browser windows you have logged in, and then log back in. So that will resolve the multiple versions issue. Last but not least, only the application creator can submit. Collaborators cannot be the one who press the submit button. So make sure when you're planning for who's going to click that submit button, that it's the person who initiated the application and invited the collaborators. Because the collaborators, while they can certainly edit, they cannot be the one to hit submit. So now we're going to walk through some of the frequently asked questions that we receive here. And as I mentioned, we are also having a detailed frequently asked questions document that will be available on the Community Workforce Partnerships page on mass.gov. But these are some questions that we see often. What is the small business worker development category? So this category is intended to include teaching skills and best practices to people who work in small businesses, whether they're micro business founders and thus self-employed, entrepreneurs, or employees of a small business. This can include traditional roles like apprenticeships, but can also include teaching digital skills, teaching bookkeeping, teaching marketing, or other facets of small business work that will benefit both the business and the individual. So in the small business worker development category, you're providing skill development for people who work for small businesses. Another question we get often is, can a single organization apply, or must they be part of a partnership? All applications have to have at least one named partner. In addition to the lead applicant, a single organization without project partners is not eligible. Or if you put on the project partner table, like to be determined, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to review your application. You do have to have at least one named partner and possibly more. And then what does a partner do? So a partner or collaborator is both a founder of and an active participant in the grant project. A partner co-steers the project as time goes on, helping to adjust the project to ensure it reaches the goals and serves the community it was intended to serve. For the purposes of this grant, partnership is more than just a financial, administrative, or referral relationship. So someone, for example, who's a funder or even a foundation that's a funder of a nonprofit wouldn't necessarily be considered a partner unless they're also actively influencing this particular project and helping to make decisions moving forward. So we've had questions about community empowerment and reinvestment grant recipients. So in the past, folks who were receiving the community empowerment grant were not eligible for funding from this program, from Community Workforce Partnerships, for the same project. So the question here is, my organization is currently receiving a community empowerment and reinvestment grant. Are we eligible? Yes, you are still eligible for Community Workforce Partnerships, assuming your organization meets all of the other criteria. And I know we've had a lot of questions from folks about what will happen if community empowerment and reinvestment is funded again in the future, and particularly in relationship to community workforce partnerships. Unfortunately, that's sort of a hypothetical question at this stage, and I really can't say what the interaction between the two will be. So as for right now, yes, you are eligible for this grant program if you are currently receiving a community empowerment and reinvestment grant. We get a lot of other questions too about summer job programs for youth or other types of youth development programming. So a summer job program for youth may be able to be funded. However, the applicant would need to clearly demonstrate that youth are being trained for specific jobs and that they will begin working in the same field shortly after completing the training program. So whatever they were learning to do over the summer, that is translating into employment shortly after. So ideally within 1 year. We say here, generally competitive applicants will need to show that the training received on these summer jobs alone is sufficient to make the youth strong job candidates within a year of completing the program. For example, a summer job installing energy conserving insulation with appropriate training, certification, and support could transition into a high demand employment option shortly after completing the summer job. Another question we receive with some frequency is, are regional, county, or multi-town or city applications competitive? No. So this project is really solely focused on funding only applications that focus on a single city, town, or neighborhood. So city or town from most of Massachusetts for 350 city or towns. And in Boston, folks can choose between either selecting one neighborhood as their area of focus or selecting the entire city of Boston. Next up, folks want to know if EOD grant staff can meet to talk about whether their project is a fit for this program. The application is the tool that we use to assess whether the project is a fit for this funding. A complete application will provide us with the information that we need to make this determination. This also ensures fairness, so no applicant gets better information than another. Unfortunately, this means that we're not able to offer preliminary assessments over email, through a phone call, or other means of communication. But we do really encourage you to take advantage of all the resources you have here at your disposal. You have the Community Workforce Partnerships RFP, including the evaluation criteria and the application template. You have the recording of this informational webinar that you're watching right now. And you have the frequently asked questions document, which is available. And now this year you also have video tips. So these are all information about the values and design of this program, and that can help you assess whether your program is well suited. Okay, here we are. We've reached the end of this webinar. Thank you so much for your interest in the Community Workforce Partnerships Grant Program. We really appreciate your time and your interest in watching this webinar. You can visit mass.gov/EOED for all the information about what's going on at this secretariat. If you do need to contact us, if you have a specific question that we haven't addressed here or in the frequently asked questions, please email us eohedgrants@mass.gov. Thank you for your time.